Hey everybody, and welcome back on board Blown Away. In this week's episode I'm going to be doing some maintenance on our Dickinson's heater, and I'm going to give you my opinion as to why this is the best way to heat your boat. Welcome to our channel. Blown Away is a steel ketch built back in the early 70s, and for the last 23 years she has been my home. And very quickly before we start this video, it is made possible with the support of our patrons and Ko-fi donations. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and please leave me a comment. I love to hear from you all. I used to run a fleet of recovery trucks that I owned, and many of them had forced air heating systems. In my humble opinion, they are overcomplicated, expensive to operate, and unreliable. The manufacturers often upgrade these models and the parts become obsolete. They are not meant for the marine environment, yet we fit them to our boats. So when it came to fitting a heating system to Blown Away, I wanted something that was simplistic in its design, meant for the marine environment, and would last me a very long time with minimal maintenance. So 20 years on, did I make the right decision? Let's take a closer look. I don't mind spending a little more money now if it means I don't have to spend money in the future. And when I started doing some research into heating systems for boats, I discovered a company called Dickinson's. Now this is a family-run business that's been in existence since 1932, and their products are made from stainless steel. And like all boats, Blown Away does not have unlimited space. Now for me to fit this heater, it would need to be bulkhead mounted. I simply didn't have space for a floor mounted system. On inspection, the Newport model seemed to be the best fit for my needs. But buying the main unit will not be your only expense. Because each installation is different, there is a selection of fitments to suit your needs. And in my case, I was able to sacrifice a corner of a sofa that was barely ever used. And being slightly offset, it meant that the flue, the chimney that came up through the deck, would be nowhere near my boom. Time for a little bit of maintenance on the heater. So let's take a look at just how simplistic this machine is. So the first piece out, this ring's usually got some carbon on top of it. And the worst offender is this item here. So you see this gets coked up. There's actually a hole through the middle of that. Inside the burner pot we've also got some carbon buildup. So we're going to chip that out inside of there, and then I'm going to use the hoover just to suck it all out. So this is where the carbon buildup is inside of the burner pot. This is where the fuel bubbles up from, and this part is full of carbon. And the best way I've found over the years to do this is with a hoover and a screwdriver. And what I do is get in there with a screwdriver to break up the carbon. As you see down in there's lots of bits of broken carbon. We've chipped it away. And then using an industrial vac, you see still some bits and pieces left in there, so I'll have another go at that. Messy. So these are the two components that we removed from the Dickinson's heater. That, as you can see, is a complete build-up of carbon. And it's also got some carbon on that ring, so we just need to clean that off. There's the ring there, and that is completely clogged up with carbon. Now the effect that that has on the heater is that you'll get an incomplete burn, and possibly you'll get smoke out of the chimney. Whether you're running a Mikuni or an Eberspacher or a cheap Chinese knockoff or one of the Russian versions, the forced air systems are more complicated than this. I used to spend more time repairing those forced air systems than I've ever spent working on this heater. So probably twice a winter we strip it down and clean it like we've done now. It takes me maybe, if I weren't filming it, it would take me 15 minutes, literally. And I get a bit of soot on my hands, I wash my hands, job done, finished. The forced air systems are just so much more complex than this. This system relies on a tiny little low pressure fuel pump, which is just pushing diesel from the tank to the bottom of the burner pot, which I'll show you in a minute. That bubbles up inside, and once it bubbles up inside, the flame, it heats, the diesel evaporates, and it burns the evaporated diesel. It's a very clean and it's a very dry process. There's very little moisture, if any, goes through this process because you've got no moisture in your diesel. It's an oil. Good enough. Well, that now, with the worst of that scraped off, that will function just fine and will last me another 3 months trouble-free heating. So you can see now that we've cleaned out the worst of the carbon buildup that was inside this burner pot. You can also see the hole where the fuel bubbles up through. Now that hole will have some carbon in it from us cleaning it, and we need to remove that or else it will get stuck in that jet and then block the fuel supply into the burner pot. So let's take a look at where that goes. Underneath our machine is a small bolt. So I'm going to place a rag on here just in case any fuel drops out. We can take our corkscrew, which is supplied by Dickinson's. So this corkscrew literally just goes inside of the fuel jet, and then all we're going to do is work that corkscrew in and out of that jet just to make sure that we don't have any blockages. You can actually see this corkscrew goes all the way through the jet. It's a big jet. It's not a small thing like a carburetor. You don't need to blow it out with an airline. Their supplied tool will do the job perfectly well. All we need to do now is replace this plug. And the fuel for my heater is supplied from the main fuel tank. I do not have a day tank, so my fuel is pumped from the main tank to the heater via this small low pressure pump, which is then filtered using a ray core before going to the float bowl of the heater. So part of the routine maintenance with this, I've taken the metering valve off. So this is a straightforward thing. Sits on there, pipe connects to there. Fuel comes in here, goes into this one, goes to our float valve, comes down through our float valve, which is this one here, fills up this bowl, so then the float rises and closes that valve down in there, and that stops fuel from coming into the bowl. And then as we turn this valve here, this is the flow rate, so the flow rate is adjusted by turning this from 1 through to 5 there. And all it does, if you watch, so there's my tapered needle right there, and if I twist the knob, it just retracts that brass rod in the center, which has a taper on it. You can see here it has a taper, and that taper just opens up this pipe here, which allows more fuel into the burning pot. Okay, we got good flow out of the float. Okay, off. Tight's tight, too tight is broken. Pump on. Okay, off. So with the sheet of paper underneath, if I do have any leaks where the fuel runs down and drips off, I can tell which pipe or which fitting is leaking, hence the tissue paper. Okay, so our two components that we removed are now going to go back in. So just drop that back in and centralize it. And then this ring goes back in and sits over there, like so. So our components are now back inside of the heater. Fuel's now starting to climb up the pipe inside. Looks like a decent flow rate to me. So we'll just wait for that to warm up. We'll clean up any carbon bits that are around here, because this stuff really does stain anything it gets onto. Okay, go. So step one, we check down inside to make sure there's no excess fuel and that no one's accidentally left the pump switched on. This is a normal household fire lighter. Standard thing that you can buy in just about any country. I put it on a fork, I put it inside, and I've now lit my fire lighter. I'm going to drop it down inside. Now what you have to make sure is it doesn't sit on top of the ring, it's actually gone down to the bottom of the burner pot. Okay, come back to our controller. I'm just going to set this at 2. That will give me a slow amount of fuel going into that burner pot. And you can see now down inside that that fire lighter is burning quite well. We've got fuel coming through the carburetor, through the jet and into the burner pot. That diesel will start to evaporate as it gets hot. And with a steady flow of fuel coming into the burner pot, the heat from the fire lighter will vaporize the fuel and the vapors will ignite. You'll see off to the side of the fire lighter now, the diesel is actually ignited. That is the beginning of this fire burning diesel. You start to see the blue flame, that is the diesel that's burning now. And you can see I haven't closed this door as yet. I don't need to. There's no risk of that flame coming out of the door. I can monitor the process quite easily. Now if I want to speed this along its way, in the same way that we use oxygen in a forge to melt metal, if I were to close this door, on the side of our heater is a fan, so I can actually force air through the heater to increase the speed at which this flame builds. We're now forcing air through that fire, and in the same way we do when we're smelting metal in a forge, we're just increasing the amount of oxygen going through that flame. And you can also see here we have a adjustable control for the flow of air that has been pushed into the heater. And under normal operations we leave the fan switched off, and there we go, our fire cleaned, lit and good for another 3 months. So one of the questions we were asked about our heater is, does it smell? It's a diesel heater, so if there's a leak in here then also you get the bit of diesel smell, but it's fairly easy to clean up. The other question we were asked is, does it smoke? Well, let's go take a look. Blowing force 5, force 6 here in Leros Marina. Let's take a look and see if our chimney smokes. I'm going to go with no. Does it put soot onto the decks? Well, I'm pretty meticulous with cleaning the boat and keeping it up together. So this is downwind of the boat, and there is no soot at all, so no, it doesn't leave soot on the deck. Time to go in and enjoy the fire, because it's chilly out here and I don't do chilly. And I can feel the heat coming back up through the companionway.
I can feel the heat leaving the companionway.
Please note this video is made for entertainment purposes only. If you burn down your boat after watching this video, not my fault. Sorry Adam and Kiara. And as always, a big shout out to our monthly Ko-fi supporters, the McKenna family, David, Eric, Captain Svetlana, Trev, your stars, thank you. And the people flying by on your screen now that sent donations for coffee, thanks very much. And a huge shout out to these attractive people, Matt, Michael, Ian, Par, Miles, Eric, Timothy, JG, Graham, Jeff and Jim. Thank you. Thanks to everybody that watched the video and sitting through the advertising, etc. I do make a very small amount of money off of that. This is my only income at the moment. I will be starting back on the timeline videos fairly shortly. The road trip is over. I am back on board Blown Away, and I am getting stuck into some pretty big maintenance jobs. Look forward to that next week. Cheers.